What if I told you that 2,000 years ago, long before the first light bulb ever flickered, human beings built machines that opened doors by themselves, heated entire buildings, and delivered running water across continents? No wires, no engines, no electricity, only fire, stone, water, and genius. This is the story of Rome. Not the Rome of emperors and gladiators, but of engineers and dreamers. The Rome that conquered not by sword, but by science. The Rome that mastered the forces of nature so completely that its inventions still outlast our own. You can still hear their hum today, in the water that runs through our pipes, in the roads we drive on, in the buildings that defy time itself. At its height, the Roman Empire was a living machine, a symphony of stone and mathematics. Aqueducts carried mountain streams into cities of 1 million souls. Hidden beneath marble floors, furnaces breathed warm air into public baths. Streets glowed with torchlight, reflected off walls mixed with volcanic ash and lime. A concrete so perfect, it still heals itself after centuries. Rome had no electricity, but it had something better: understanding. Imagine standing in the heart of the city at dusk. The air smells of wine, smoke, and iron. Around you, fountains murmur like living veins. Beneath your feet, water surges through tunnels carved by hand. In the distance, bathhouses roar with laughter and steam while blacksmiths hammer molten metal into precision tools. Everything moves, everything works, because Roman engineers learned to bend gravity, pressure, and heat to their will. The world's first smart city, built entirely by human hands. But time is cruel to memory. When the empire fell, so did much of its knowledge. Libraries burned, roads cracked, aqueducts dried. The genius that once flowed like water through Roman streets disappeared into centuries of silence. And yet, scattered across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, their secrets remain, etched in stone, sealed in volcanic ash, and waiting to be rediscovered. Today, we will walk among those ruins. We will descend beneath the streets where water once whispered through marble pipes, stand beneath arches that defied gravity, and uncover 12 technologies so advanced they feel almost supernatural. Each one born from a civilization that had no machines, only minds. Minds that saw nature not as a mystery, but as a partner. From concrete that grows stronger with age, to doors that opened with fire, to entire cities powered by the silent pull of gravity. This is not mythology. This is not fantasy. This is Rome, the empire that learned to engineer the impossible without ever touching a switch. Long before pipes hummed beneath modern streets, Rome had already solved the puzzle of water. Not with pumps, wires, or engines, but with a single eternal law of nature: gravity. Where others saw the limits of landscape, Roman engineers saw opportunity. They learned how to command rivers, tame mountains, and make water obey mathematics. It was not just engineering, it was a form of worship. Water, after all, was life, and Rome was determined to make life flow forever. High in the hills beyond the city, springs bubbled from the earth, cold and pure. From there, men in tunics and leather sandals marked the line of descent, measuring angles not with machines, but with water-filled bowls, plumb lines, and the patience of gods. Every drop mattered. The slope had to be perfect, never too steep, never too shallow. One error, and the entire system could fail. But when it worked, it was magic. Water flowed over valleys, through tunnels, beneath mountains, guided only by the pull of the earth. By 300 BCE, Rome was already home to a marvel that stunned the ancient world: the Aqua Appia. 10 miles of hidden channels carrying water into the beating heart of the city. But this was just the beginning. Over the next centuries, the Romans built 11 massive aqueducts, weaving a web of liquid power that stretched for hundreds of miles. The Aqua Claudia rose upon colossal arches 40 feet high, striding across the countryside like the spine of a sleeping giant. The Aqua Marcia carried water so pure that emperors demanded it for their private baths. The numbers alone defy belief. By the reign of Emperor Trajan, Rome consumed over 200 million gallons of water every day, more than some modern cities. It flowed into fountains, baths, gardens, even private homes of the wealthy. The poor drank from free public basins. The rich washed marble floors in running water. Every Roman, no matter their rank, lived in a city that never stopped flowing. But the true brilliance of the aqueducts wasn't just their size, it was their precision. Every 50 paces, workers could descend through maintenance shafts to clear debris or patch cracks. Builders carved inspection tunnels through mountains, allowing light and fresh air to reach laborers working deep underground. The aqueduct wasn't a monument. It was a living system, maintained by thousands, sustained by discipline. It was Rome itself, organized, relentless, and eternal. And the water that reached the city was more than utility. It was spectacle. It gushed from fountains carved into the shapes of gods. It cascaded through public baths, mingling with the scent of oils and laughter. Senators debated laws while steam rose around them. Philosophers washed away dust before entering temples. To the Romans, water was purity, prosperity, and proof of divine favor. To see it run clear and cold beneath a summer sun was to know that civilization was working. Even Rome's enemies stood in awe. When foreign ambassadors first arrived and saw water racing over stone arches, they were speechless. No empire had ever commanded nature so gracefully. Rome didn't just conquer people, it conquered the elements. And through those channels, it fed its cities, powered its mills, and sustained its legions. 2,000 years later, the arches still stand. The Pont du Gard in France still spans its river, untouched by time. The aqueducts of Segovia and Nimes still carry echoes of water in their hollow cores. And though the empire fell, the principle remains. The purest energy is not electricity or steam, it is gravity. The Romans understood this, and they built a world that flowed. When you stand beneath one of those ancient bridges, you can still hear it, a whisper of water, a murmur from the past. It says, "We never needed power. We had knowledge." And that, perhaps, is the most astonishing technology of all. Walk through the ruins of Rome, and you will feel something strange beneath your feet. Not just stone, but defiance. The walls, the domes, the harbors, they still stand after 2,000 years, enduring earthquakes, storms, and the slow decay of time. The secret that holds them together is neither iron nor magic. It's a material so advanced that modern science is still trying to understand it. The Romans called it opus cementitium. We call it Roman concrete, the recipe for immortality. The story of this miracle begins not with an emperor, but with a fire. In 64 CE, half of Rome burned to the ground. Wooden beams collapsed, temples crumbled, and marble split under the heat. Yet when the city rebuilt, it did so with a new promise, that Rome would never fall again to flame or time. Builders began mixing volcanic ash from Mount Vesuvius with lime, water, and rock. What emerged was not just stone, it was chemistry ahead of its age. Unlike modern concrete, which weakens and cracks, Roman concrete grows stronger with time. Seawater, instead of corroding it, feeds it. The lime inside reacts with the salt and minerals to form new crystals, sealing its own fractures. It is, in the truest sense, alive. The Romans didn't know the word nanotechnology, but they practiced it. Every arch, every dome, every aqueduct became part of a self-healing organism. Their buildings didn't resist nature. They worked with it. Nowhere is this more breathtaking than in the Pantheon, the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. Built in 126 CE, it still defies gravity with elegance that borders on arrogance. The dome thins as it rises, from 20 feet thick at the base to less than 5 at the oculus, where sunlight pours through the opening like a spotlight from the heavens. The mixture of volcanic ash and lighter pumice keeps it stable, perfectly balanced. For nearly 2 millennia, it has stood unbroken, a silent challenge to modern engineering. But the Romans didn't save their genius for temples. Their concrete-built ports that resisted the sea itself. The harbor at Caesarea Maritima in Judea was a marvel, a massive breakwater constructed underwater where divers poured volcanic ash and lime into wooden frames. The mix reacted instantly with seawater, solidifying into rock that still endures today. These underwater structures outlasted empires. The secret lay not only in the formula, but in an understanding of environment, of letting earth and ocean work together rather than against one another. And it wasn't just durability. Roman concrete changed the very language of architecture. It allowed forms that stone could never bear: soaring vaults, curved walls, vast baths that seemed to breathe light. The baths of Caracalla, for instance, stretched higher than a modern cathedral, heated by furnaces beneath the floors and lit by great glass windows, all supported by walls of concrete. Rome became the first civilization to build not from blocks, but from imagination. When the empire fell, the recipe fell with it. Medieval builders tried to copy it, but their lime and stone lacked the volcanic magic of Pozzuoli ash. Centuries of trial brought imitation, but never perfection. Even today, modern concrete crumbles in mere decades, while Roman harbors still hold fast against the tides. Engineers and chemists analyze ancient samples under microscopes, searching for the secret. What they've discovered is almost poetic. The Romans didn't mix perfection. They let it grow inside the stone. So next time you stand before the Pantheon or the Colosseum, remember, what you see is not ruin, it's endurance. The Romans discovered how to turn time into an ally, how to make the earth itself heal their creations. In a world without electricity, without machines, they invented a material that could live forever. And in that alchemy of ash and ambition, they achieved something even emperors could not. They defeated decay. If Rome was the heart of civilization, its pulse was mechanical. The clang of iron, the groan of wood, the hiss of water. These were not the sounds of chaos, but of purpose. Long before the first gears of the Industrial Revolution began to turn, Rome had already built a world that moved. From the thunder of siege engines to the quiet churn of watermills, the Romans mastered motion itself, turning the forces of nature into tools of empire. Let us begin on the battlefield. Picture a legion encamped on a hilltop, the air thick with the smell of pine, sweat, and anticipation. Before dawn, soldiers haul massive beams of timber into place. Engineers, the architecti, walk among them with measuring rods and wax tablets. Within hours, the still air explodes with sound. From behind walls of shields, the Romans unleash a storm of precision. The ballista. The ballista was not just a weapon, it was mathematics made lethal. Twin arms of twisted sinew stored the tension of hundreds of men, flinging bolts longer than spears with a shriek that could shatter morale before impact. At its peak, a single shot could punch through armor or impale 2 soldiers at once. The principle behind it, stored torsion energy, was pure physics. The Romans didn't just use force, they engineered it, optimizing every angle, every rope, every trigger. Then came the onager, the wild donkey, a monstrous catapult that hurled stones the size of a man's torso. When it fired, the ground shook, walls cracked. The Romans had turned elasticity and counterweight into devastation. And yet, what's most remarkable isn't the destruction, it's the discipline. Each siege engine was built on the same proportions, following detailed treatises that modern engineers would recognize as blueprints. To the Romans, war was not chaos, it was geometry. But the Romans did not live by war alone. The same minds that crafted death machines also built instruments of life, powered not by blood, but by water. Across the empire, where rivers cut through valleys and aqueducts bridged the sky, Roman engineers learned to capture flow and turn it into work. They built water wheels, vast wooden circles that harnessed the river's strength to grind grain, saw stone, and crush ore. Near Arles, in southern Gaul, archaeologists discovered an entire industrial complex, 16 water wheels carved into a hillside, fed by a single diverted stream. Together, they formed one of the earliest examples of mass production in human history. Grain poured in at one end, flour poured out at the other, all powered by nothing but the steady current of a river. The idea of a factory, a system where machines did the labor of men, was not born in the 18th century. It was born in Rome. Even more astonishing were their hydraulic sawmills. Yes, sawmills, powered by water. In the ruins of Hierapolis in modern-day Turkey, archaeologists found evidence of machines that used a crank and connecting rod mechanism, a design that would not be reinvented until a millennium later in the Renaissance. Water turned a wheel. The wheel turned a crank. The crank drove a saw up and down. Timber became planks, marble became slabs. Rome was already industrializing, centuries before the word existed. These machines weren't isolated marvels, they were systems. A Roman city thrived because its engineers knew how to balance the delicate equation between nature and need. Gravity carried water, pressure lifted it, flow powered mills, heat fueled baths. From one element to another, energy never died. It only changed form. And that was the Roman secret, the understanding that power was not something you created, but something you guided. So, while we look back and see an empire of marble and myth, Rome saw itself as something else entirely, a civilization of motion. Its catapults were logic under tension, its mills were rivers turned to rhythm, its saws were rivers singing in steel. In every stream and every gust of wind, the Romans heard opportunity. They didn't need electricity. They had the world itself wired into their imagination. The morning air in ancient Rome could be cruel. Stone floors bit like ice, and winter fog crept through marble corridors like a living ghost. But step into a Roman bathhouse, and that chill vanished as though banished by the gods themselves. Warm air rose through the floor, steam curled around the pillars, and marble walls glowed faintly in the light of fire. This was no miracle. It was a masterpiece, the hypocaust, the first central heating system in human history. The principle was breathtakingly simple, and yet, for its time, almost divine. Beneath the floors of Rome's villas and bathhouses, engineers built a network of hollow bricks and pillars, pile stacks, creating a raised foundation called a suspensura. Into this space, slaves tended furnaces called praefurnia, feeding them with wood day and night. The hot air moved through the cavities beneath the floor, climbed inside flue tiles hidden in the walls, and radiated warmth through the rooms above. Without a single wire or engine, the Romans had learned to command heat itself. Imagine entering the baths of Caracalla, the grandest of all. Its ceilings soared nearly 40 meters high, its halls big enough to hold thousands of people at once. Beneath its floors, hundreds of slaves shoveled fuel into roaring furnaces, the sound echoing like a distant heartbeat. Water tanks above heated from the rising air, feeding pools of every temperature, frigid, warm, and scalding. Men floated beneath painted ceilings, women whispered in private chambers, and all of it, every sigh of steam, every drop of warmth, came from the invisible breath of fire beneath their feet. To the Romans, bathing was more than cleanliness. It was culture, a ritual that united classes, a ceremony of health, politics, and philosophy. A senator could sit shoulder to shoulder with a soldier, both sweating under the same heat that the empire itself had engineered. The Hippocaust transformed public life. It turned water and fire into comfort, stone into serenity. The empire that had once worshipped Vulcan, god of flame, had learned to cage his power and make it serve civilization. But the Hippocaust did more than warm bodies. It shaped architecture. Builders had to design rooms with airflow in mind, tiles hollowed for circulation, bricks aligned to channel heat efficiently, chimneys concealed within mosaicked walls. Every floor was both structure and conduit, every column a vessel for energy. The knowledge spread like fire itself, from Britannia to Syria. Even in the frost-bitten edges of empire, Roman villas glowed with warmth in the dead of winter. And as always, the Romans thought beyond luxury. The same principles used in bathhouses warmed hospitals and homes. Archaeologists have uncovered hypocausts beneath military outposts along Hadrian's Wall, proof that even the frontiers of empire demanded comfort and control. It wasn't just about pleasure, it was about endurance. A warm soldier fought longer, a healthy citizen lived better, and a thriving city stayed loyal. Heat was political, and Rome understood that. What makes this technology truly astonishing is how long it would take humanity to rediscover it. When the empire fell, the Hippocaust vanished with it. Medieval Europe shivered for centuries in cold stone castles, their inhabitants huddled by crude hearths. Central heating would not return until the 19th century, 1500 years later. The knowledge of how to make air move, how to make heat flow, forgotten, buried beneath ashes and empire dust. Yet in ruins across Europe, the evidence remains. Brick pillars blackened by fire, flue tiles still faintly warm in memory. In Bath, in Pompeii, in Troia, the old warmth lingers. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear the echo of the furnaces, the whisper of flame running underfoot. It is the ghost of comfort, proof that 2 millennia before radiators and thermostats, the Romans had already found a way to make winter bow to their will. In a world powered only by muscle, wood, and imagination, they had built a civilization that breathed warmth. And though the fires have long gone out, the idea remains eternal. True power isn't just the strength to conquer, but the wisdom to make even the cold obey you. Long before the age of electricity, one man made temples move, fire command machines, and coins trigger miracles. His name was Heron of Alexandria, and though he lived on the empire's eastern edge, he embodied Rome's greatest gift, the fusion of imagination and engineering. To Heron, gears, levers, and air pressure were not toys. They were divine instruments. His machines blurred the line between magic and science, turning simple forces into wonder. Picture a crowded temple in the 1st century CE. Incense coils in the air, priests chant before a statue of the god, and worshippers line up with offerings. A priest lights a flame upon the altar, and suddenly, with a groan of bronze and a hiss of steam, the temple doors open by themselves. The crowd gasps, stepping back in awe. They see no ropes, no slaves pulling hidden levers, only the divine responding to worship. But behind the altar, Heron's genius hides in plain sight. Beneath the altar, the heat from the flame warms a sealed brass globe filled with air. As the air expands, it pushes water through a pipe into a bucket. The bucket, now heavier, pulls a system of ropes and pulleys, and the doors swing open. When the flame dies, the air cools, the water flows back, and the doors slowly close. It is pure thermodynamics, 2,000 years before the word existed. Fire becomes motion. Belief becomes engineering. But Heron's imagination did not end there. In his scrolls, Pneumatica and Automata, he described machines that could refill themselves, fountains that never stopped flowing, and even what we might call the world's first vending machine. For a few coins, worshippers could buy holy water, dispensed automatically. When a coin dropped into the slot, it landed on a small metal pan. The weight pushed down a lever that opened a valve, letting a measured amount of liquid pour out. When the water flowed, the coin slid away and the valve shut. Simple, elegant, centuries ahead of its time. He also built the Eolipile, the world's first steam engine. It was a hollow sphere mounted on an axis, with two bent tubes at its sides. When heated, steam shot through the tubes, spinning the sphere at astonishing speed. It produced no work, served no purpose, but it proved a principle that would not be harnessed until 1,700 years later, when the Industrial Revolution caught up with Heron's imagination. His devices didn't merely entertain. They taught. Through them, Rome learned that natural forces, air, heat, gravity, could be manipulated with precision. They inspired engineers to use siphons to move water uphill, to build fountains that recycled their own flow, to design theaters where mechanical birds sang and gods moved across the stage by hidden pulleys. In a world lit only by fire, Rome had already discovered automation. What's remarkable is how Heron's inventions survived, not as relics, but as legends whispered among scholars. Byzantine and Islamic engineers studied his works, adapting them for their own courts. Centuries later, when Renaissance thinkers rediscovered Heron's scrolls, they called him the father of mechanics. Leonardo da Vinci himself borrowed his principles, sketching automatons and hydraulic devices that would make Heron proud. The flame that once opened temple doors had become the spark that reignited invention. And yet there's something haunting about Heron's story. His machines were not celebrated as science, but as miracles. To the priests, they proved the God's presence. To the people, they inspired faith. Few understood the physics behind them. Heron's brilliance was hidden behind incense and ritual. The world wasn't ready to see the divine as mechanical, or the mechanical as divine. Still, across the centuries, his legacy hums quietly in every motion sensor, every automatic door, every vending machine that exchanges coins for goods. The same principles of balance, air, pressure, and flow remain unchanged. Heron of Alexandria had seen a future powered not by magic or electricity, but by understanding. When the flame on the temple altar burned low and the doors swung shut once more, the worshippers saw the will of a god. But Heron knew the truth. It was the will of reason, invisible, unstoppable, eternal. If Roman concrete was the skeleton of the empire, and aqueducts were its veins, then the roads were its nerves, carrying orders, armies, and ideas across 3 continents with a precision no civilization had ever achieved. They were the first true highways in human history. Straight, unbroken, unyielding. Long before the world was wired by electricity, Rome had already built a system of connection so vast, so flawless, that it could deliver messages faster than most nations of the Middle Ages. "All roads lead to Rome" was not a proverb. It was logistics. The empire's engineers carved over 250,000 miles of road, spanning from the misted shores of Britain to the burning sands of Syria. They did not meander with the land. They conquered it. Marshes were drained, mountains were cut, valleys filled. The road builders laid foundations of stone and gravel in layers so meticulously compacted that some Roman roads still bear the weight of modern trucks today. The design was as elegant as it was enduring. First, a trench was dug, agger, filled with stones for drainage. On top came gravel and crushed limestone, then larger paving stones carefully fitted together like a puzzle, sealed with molten tar. A raised center let rainwater roll off, while ditches at the edges prevented erosion. Mile markers stood like silent sentinels, engraved with the names of the emperors who ordered them, ancient signposts guiding travelers through eternity. But these roads were not merely for trade or travel. They were arteries of control. When rebellion flared in a distant province, messages sped across the empire through the cursus publicus, the Roman postal system. Couriers on horseback carried sealed scrolls from one mutatio, relay station, to the next, changing mounts every few miles. With this system, a message could travel 500 miles in a single day, a feat not surpassed until the telegraph was invented 18 centuries later. The empire could think, react, and strike as one. It was not only words that traveled those roads, it was knowledge. Along the way, engineers mapped distances, recorded routes, and compiled them into the Tabula Peutingeriana, a vast Roman roadmap stretching across the known world. Though distorted to fit parchment, it listed cities, rivers, and landmarks, an ancient web of connectivity that predated GPS by millennia. For generals, merchants, and scholars, the world had become legible, measurable, traversable. And then there were the beacons, the wireless messages of antiquity. Across hills and fortresses, Rome maintained chains of watchtowers, each within sight of the next. By day, they sent signals through mirrors and smoke. By night, through fire. A single spark could leap from the coast of Spain to the heart of Italy in hours, warning of invasion or declaring victory. In a world without electricity, Rome had already built a network of light. The empire's efficiency extended even to the smallest detail. Roads were lined with mansions, rest stations for couriers and officials, offering food, fresh horses, and beds. Bridges of volcanic stone spanned rivers with arches so stable they still stand. The roads even guided drainage from aqueducts, watering crops along their sides. Infrastructure wasn't just function, it was philosophy. To the Romans, movement was civilization. Stagnation was death. And yet, beneath all that grandeur, there was a kind of poetry to it. Imagine a Roman messenger galloping at dusk, dust rising behind him, torchlight glinting on his armor. Beneath his horse's hooves lies the most advanced system of roads ever built, each stone placed by hands long forgotten. Ahead lies a city he's never seen, a future he'll never know. Behind him, the empire thrums, connected by an invisible current of stone, speed, and willpower. Even after the empire crumbled, its roads refused to die. Medieval kingdoms grew around them. Pilgrims walked them. Empires rose upon their foundations. The modern highways of Europe still trace their paths, as though the world never truly stopped traveling to Rome. For an empire without electricity, it built something eerily modern, a network that carried not just armies or messages, but the idea that humanity could be united by connection. And perhaps that's the truest legacy of all. Long before fiber optics and satellites, Rome had already proven that communication, the power to move ideas, was the real engine of civilization. The roads may be silent now, their stones worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. But listen closely, and you can almost hear it. The faint echo of hooves, the whisper of wheels, the heartbeat of an empire that refused to stand still. Night falls over the ruins of the empire. The wind sighs through broken arches, and moonlight drips across the bones of old cities, aqueducts, amphitheaters, the hollow eyes of statues that once looked upon the greatest experiment in human engineering. The Romans are gone. The marble is cracked. But listen closely, and you'll hear it still. The hum of a civilization that refused to die. Their machines have stopped moving, yet their ideas still run through us. For Rome never truly vanished. It was absorbed, piece by piece, invention by invention, into the bloodstream of the world. The aqueducts became the modern plumbing systems that flow beneath our cities. The Hippocaust evolved into the pipes that warm our homes. The roads they carved into the earth became the very paths we drive upon. The gears of Heron, the steam of his Eolipile, the gravity of their fountains, all whispers that grew into the roar of the modern age. Even the word engineer carries their ghost. From the Latin ingenium, meaning ingenuity, cleverness, it once described the spirit of creation itself. The Romans believed that invention was divine, that to understand the forces of nature was to share in the gods' language. They didn't pray for miracles, they built them. Without electricity, they harnessed fire and pressure. Without steel, they carved stone to flow like water. They conquered the physical world through intellect, not illusion. And yet perhaps their greatest achievement was not a machine, but a mindset. The belief that progress could be built, not simply imagined. Every arch, every gear, every measurement was a declaration of faith in human reason. In a world ruled by superstition, Rome dared to be logical. Its temples opened their doors by flame. Its cities glowed by reflection of torchlight. Its aqueducts sang the mathematics of gravity. They made nature a partner, not a mystery. But there's tragedy in that brilliance. When Rome fell, so did its memory. Centuries of darkness followed, not because the world forgot how to build, but because it forgot why. Knowledge turned to legend, science to superstition. Where Heron's automatic doors once amazed the faithful, candles flickered in ignorance. Humanity had glimpsed enlightenment, only to let it fade. For 1,000 years the earth slept, until the Renaissance cracked its eyes open again and found Rome waiting there in the ruins. Today, when we flip a switch and command light, when water rushes from a faucet, when heat fills a room without a flame, we live in Rome's afterglow. We believe we're modern because our machines hum and our screens shine. But beneath every circuit, every engine, every architectural marvel lies a Roman principle: control of flow, of energy, of space. We've added power, but not necessarily wisdom. The ancients did more with less because they understood balance, the delicate harmony between force and design. Stand now beneath the Pont de Garde or the Pantheon's dome and look upward. The stones whisper the same secret they told their builders. Permanence is born of simplicity. The aqueduct still carries echoes of water. The concrete still binds its own cracks. The roads still guide the feet of nations that no longer speak Latin. Rome's technology was not built for speed or spectacle. It was built to last. And it has. The empire may have crumbled, but its inventions outlived its emperors. They do not glow or whir or shine. They endure. That endurance, the quiet defiance of stone and thought, is Rome's true immortality. The world we know, the one powered by electricity and light, is only a continuation of a dream born 2,000 years ago. That knowledge, guided by discipline, could make humanity eternal. As the night deepens over the ruins, the stars glitter above the Tiber, and the arches cast shadows like the ribs of an ancient god. The city sleeps, but its pulse remains, not in the hum of wires, but in the silence of stone that still works. The Romans never needed electricity. They had something far brighter, the light of understanding.